I decided to do my project on No Country for Old Men and specifically the nihilism that it discusses throughout the film. We'll just start off with the introduction. It was a film created by the Coen brothers, and they are known for creating nihilistic crime dramas. They have a lot of quiet violence, so it's not very hyperbolic. They have a subversion of the underdog character with the main character, who the audience is intended to root for over the course of the entire story, but who ends up losing. No Country for Old Men is a part of the neo-Western genre, which typically tends to be more darkly realistic in its tone and delivery. The current events that were occurring, there was the Iraq War, which a lot of Americans felt a sort of moral decay was occurring amongst the population and a normalization of violence. As well as that, the iPhone was released, which meant the cultural progression of society was rapidly increasing, and there was an extreme interconnectedness that allowed us to see more of this moral decay easier. So for the story and the atmosphere, start off with the characters. We've got Moss. He's the underdog protagonist, and he kind of represents, I feel like, the audience's understanding of the world, the kind of ideology that if you do the right things and you work hard, you're going to be rewarded for your efforts. Anton is the main antagonist of the film, but he's a representation of the world we live in, not caring who lives or dies, and we are all just a slave to determinism. Ed Tom Bell is the police chief in the film, and he's a stand-in for the beliefs of the older generation. And then Carla is Moss's wife, and she is kind of the antithesis to Anton. So the plot, we start off with the main character Moss finds drug money in the aftermath of a fight, and the entire plot of the film is him being hunted by Anton for the money. A Western prior to the neo-Western genre would have probably had him succeed despite the odds as this underdog, but in this film he just dies at the end and then he goes and kills his wife. So the style and presentation. Overall, it's very dramatic. There's a lot of high contrast shots, and even during the day, like a lot of the movie takes place during the day, but a lot of it is just really dark and it feels uncomfortable. So now the ethics that the film presents, and the first one that I'll talk about is it challenges the notion of free will a lot with like very directly with the character of Anton. I mean, everyone he kills in the movie is based off of a coin flip. Is he's concluded that nihilism is the answer, which is just there is no intrinsic value or meaning or in human life or the human experience, and we are just doing things based off of cause and effect. By having that belief system, he's able to commit atrocities throughout the whole run of the film and feel nothing because it's not him. It was a predetermined fate. The world the Coen brothers made kind of agrees with this idea since he ends up getting in this car crash, and it's kind of suggesting that like yeah, the universe is uncaring and he's not just going to win all throughout. Like there's an equal chance for negative things to happen to anyone at any moment. Anton also believes he's like kind of an inevitability, like someone like him is just going to exist in a world that is created by chance. One of the reasons that I wanted to choose this film was because it was one of the first films that I had ever personally seen that was doing a subversion of the trope of an protagonist winning. I've never seen for this a film where an antagonist won. Let's see. So how did they go about creating this film that gets you to question philosophy and the ethics that we can draw from that philosophy? Well, in an interview, they admitted to having very minimal talking and direction. It was a very quiet set, apparently. Their pre-production was very extensive, so there wasn't any debate over how they would be portraying these things. They just already knew, and it was everyone was already debriefed. They were just going from shot to shot and getting what they needed. During their pre-production process, they followed a book to type format where they took the original book by McCarthy, and one of them read it out loud, and one of them typed it. And really, they weren't really looking to inject their own artistic license to it, just like enhance and retell the story in a film format. And I also think the restrained tone helped a lot with because there's these hyper-violent scenes which help discuss its tone of determinism, but I feel like that very easily could have been overdone or like seen as like a shock value because they're most of the scenes where they had intense violence with action, it was silent, slow moments sprinkled throughout it that kept it and more so just like a calm discussion of the themes that they were trying to communicate. So my analysis of the ethics, there's a few philosophical belief systems that come together that you need to understand before we can really get into the ethical implications. The first one is determinism. I've talked about this a little bit. Anton is the representation of this in the story. He believes that he's not in control of his fate. So he is then absolved from all of the consequences of his actions morally. He doesn't need to feel bad or anything because he's just going along for the ride. And they make this really literal through the form of him using a coin flip. So it's like he's not only mentally knowing that his desires and what he's doing is predetermined, but he's like literally giving it to a physical, he's giving the responsibility to a physical object. And I felt like that was a really interesting way to talk about determinism because it breaks down a very complicated, kind of hard to understand concept very simply. Um, And his determinism leads to nihilism. And this is where the core of the ethical messaging is, because if there is no meaning or intrinsic value, he can't be a free agent, and we cannot dispense justice onto an agent that has no agency. If you're forced to do something, is that ethically wrong? And I think that's one of the big questions that I love about this film that is brought up. And the antithesis to his character is Carla, because I mean, she very directly in the film just calls out like that his coin is not an absolution of his actions, and he's just developed this permission structure to commit these acts for himself so that he doesn't have to feel negatively about it. Me personally, I don't prescribe to any of this. I prescribe to something kind of in the middle, compatibilism, which is basically I don't believe that free will and determinism can not coexist. I think you can believe in both. Like determinism could affect the physical world, but there could be levels of agency that exist outside of that, like through consciousnesses. Um, and basically through compatibilism, you can have determinism. You can believe that we live in a world that is ruled by cause and effect while simultaneously maintaining moral responsibility of agents. Because even if all of my desires are something that was predetermined and given to me, I can still, in this moment, based off of those desires, choose to do things. So my conclusion. So here's my conclusion plus a little visual aid I made to help um, understand the reception. But upon its release, it was immediately critically acclaimed, and I personally believe it will stand the test of time because it's very tastefully written. It had a lot of respect for the source material that it was copying, and it doesn't hyperbolize or dramatize for attention. You know, it seems like it actually had a message that it wanted to talk about, and it talked about it effectively. And my takeaway from the movie is, it made me, it was one of the first movies that made me think so deeply about all of this. Like, I appreciate now movies that get me to challenge my perspective on things. And it made me one day want to create a film that utilizes the quiet restraint that they used when like the silence during the action scenes. It was so much more impactful and grounded in reality, and it felt so much more real and like worth thinking about, I guess, because of the strategies that the Coen brothers applied. So, and then on your right, I've got I made a little graph for the people who don't like No Country for Old Men at 0 and the people who do at 100, because I assume that's accurate. Thank you. And citations.